Hi guys, and welcome to another Salient Process Automation Anywhere technical tutorial. In this edition we're going to talk about saving state from one task to another. So imagine that we run a task, and at the completion of that task we want to save the state of that task so that when it's next restarted, or when it's started for a subsequent time, we retrieve the previously saved state. For example, imagine that we're processing files in a file system, and whenever the task runs, perhaps it runs periodically, we want to only process the files that were created after we last ran the task. So that would seem to imply that we need to remember the set of files that were handled previously. So we need to be able to save the state of a task when it completes so that we can retrieve that state the next time it starts so we can carry on. Now there's many ways that we can achieve this, but in this example we're going to look at saving our state data in a local file on the file system where Automation Anywhere bots run. So we can imagine a bot starting up, and it opens a file and it reads the file, and in that file is the description of the state data. Once it's read that state data, it then carries on, does its work, and then before it completes it rewrites the file with new state data. Now what should be in the file? Automation Anywhere provides first-class support for saving and reading XML-based documents. So XML seems like a really good way to save a structured data. So let's look at this task here. We start, we open a file, and in this case it's called temp state.xml, and from that file we then parse out the variables or the values var1 and var2, place those in the local variables var1 and var2, and then we carry on doing some work. And in this case I just add 1 to the value of var2. And then before the task completes, we once again open the XML file, but this time we rewrite the values from our variables back into the XML document, and we write it back out to a file on the file system, again the temp.state. So if we look at the current initial content of state.xml, we see that it contains var2 as an element, which contains the value 1 and some other value. Now if I run this bot, hit the run button, the bot will now start up and it will perform its work. It's running, it's finished. Quick as that, there's no user interaction in this. And if we now go back and look at the XML file, we'll find that it now contains the value 2. So let's run it again just to see. We run it, the bot starts. When the bot starts, it's going to read the XML file, going to read the variables, add 1 to the variable, rewrite the file, and if we reload the file, we see that it now contains the variable free. So that's pretty much the end of the tutorial, but what we've illustrated here is a couple of features. First of all, we've demonstrated that we can read and write from XML-based files. We can retrieve the elements in those XML files and assign them to variables. So that is the restoration of our state data. And then conversely, we can also create new files which are XML formatted, and within those files save the current state of our variables to fields within the XML elements contained within the file, and save that so that when the task ends we have saved the state of our task. Now what you decide to include or exclude in the XML document, that's completely up to you. Also note that in this example we've not done any error handling. What I mean by that is if this file didn't initially exist, for example, then this task would fail. So we would want to, in a production or more robust solution, bracket this XML handling with error handling so that in the event there was a file IO error, or the file didn't exist, or the file was of the wrong format, we gracefully degrade. Perhaps we would initialize our variables to default values, or maybe create a template XML file before actually processing the XML file proper. So there's some thoughts on error handling. Now another thing I want to bring to our attention is the notion of sessions. Think of a session like a handle onto the XML data we're working with. So this would allow me to intermingle multiple XML document manipulations simultaneously. So when I open this XML file, I associate that with the logical handle session 1, and then when I perform my XML work, I do it against the handle session 1. Now we'll notice here we open an XML document, we do some manipulation with it, and then we close the session. Great. And here we open a session, we do some work with it, we close the session. Now notice that I've called the two sessions different names. This is session 1 and this is session 2. Obviously nothing wrong with that, but when I first coded this up, I called this session 1, and then I went down here and I also called this session 1. And that seemed like a logical thing to do, or a non-intrusive thing to do, because this first section up here, it closed session 1. So in principle, session 1 is now no longer in scope. I could use session 1 again. Not so fast. Unfortunately, it appears that Automation Anywhere's client doesn't let me reuse session names even though the previous session has been closed. So take care about that, because by default sessions are called default, and if you're not paying attention you might find that you create two sessions in here, both of which are called default, and the second one will complain bitterly because you can't open a session with the same name twice, even though the first session has completed. Bit of a little technical gotcha there. Well, I hope you found something useful in this video, and I look forward to making more in the future. Thanks guys, and bye bye.